I saw a text arrive. Her phone stayed face down during visits. It stayed face down again after each visit without change. It has not turned over yet. Her reply came at 2:13 a.m., hours after my goodnight. I need space. The screen lit the ceiling in a thin blue strip. I didn't answer. I put the phone face down on the table and looked at the chair by the window. Her faded green scarf was still looped over the back, soft at the edges, one corner thinning to threads. She wore it year-round, even when the heat made the air a little slow. She said it made her feel like herself. It looked like it was still trying to do that, all on its own. Space, she said. I measured it in miles. I packed a small bag without turning on the overhead light, took a sweatshirt and a toothbrush, the book I'd been pretending to read. I locked the door quietly and slept on my brother's couch. He didn't ask for a reason. He doesn't make problems into projects. In the morning he slid a mug across the table and said, "Whenever," which was generous and enough. I kept my phone on silent and ran the river until the path emptied out. Cold air in, warm air out. The water kept its own pace and ignored mine. I liked that. The message stayed where it was, a clean line I didn't try to add to. No follow-up, no test for tone. She wanted air. I learned how to leave none of mine around hers. The apartment sounded different when I came by for clothes. The hum of the fridge was a little victory. The clock on the stove seemed louder. Without two sets of keys, two voices moving around corners, the rooms lifted a little, like shoulders that had been braced too long. I didn't open drawers I didn't need. I didn't straighten what wasn't crooked. The scarf still hung on the chair, keeping its shape, waiting for a neck that was already somewhere else. I let days stack like that. A run before work, a second loop if the light held. I answered texts that needed answers. I ignored the ones that wanted a feeling. At night I was tired in a clean way, the kind that didn't ask for debate. My brother put on a game and we watched without talking. The couch wasn't mine but it held. People let you go quiet if you start quiet. A couple of friends sent a "how are you" I didn't make heavy. Fine, I wrote. Busy. True enough. I stopped walking past the cafe we used to use as a halfway point. I took a different train home. Small edits that made the map easier to carry. I didn't tell her where I was. I didn't ask where she was. The last word was already in the room and it didn't need help. Every time I stepped back inside to grab a shirt or a charger, the scarf drew my eye, green gone soft from years of handling, familiar in a way that didn't ask to be kept. I left it there. Space was simple once I stopped filling it. I ran, I slept, I worked. I let the apartment breathe. I let the scarf wait. And I kept my reply the same as the message I'd received, short, clear, and quiet. Space turned into a timetable. Dinners slid off the week with light apologies and errands that appeared right on cue. Running late, work popped up, let's do tomorrow. Tomorrow became a message the next morning, brief, tidy, and nowhere specific. I kept my replies small. All good. Another time. I didn't offer a new plan. I let them cancel themselves. Mornings lost their shape. Instead of coffee at the counter, we traded summaries. She liked bullet points. I kept mine shorter each day. My miles got longer. Early loops by the river, where the water didn't care what day it was. A different train home, standing by the door so I could step off fast. The calendar on the fridge gathered markers for catch-ups and quick things. I recognized none of the rooms and didn't ask. The scarf moved without a word. One evening I found it looped over the doorknob, the faded green soft and familiar against the metal. It looked like a quiet flag posted at the entrance to a place we used to share. She wore it in heat and cold. Now it guarded a door she rarely opened before midnight. When she did come, it was late. Keys set down carefully, as if the table might startle. Her eyes carried a brightness from somewhere else, and took a moment to adjust to our dim kitchen. Phone face down. A smile that landed and held, the way you hold a line on stage until the cue arrives. I offered tea. Sometimes she said yes and then didn't drink it. We talked in plain topics. Traffic, the weather, a podcast that someone recommended. She waited for questions I didn't ask. I let the pause settle. Once she stood by the window and said, "It's just busy right now. A lot of moving parts." I nodded. She watched me for something I didn't provide, then looked at the scarf and tightened her ponytail instead. Small fixes for bigger things. Over time, her chair drifted an inch away from the table and stayed there. She angled her body to the hall, like she was already half on her way out. The apartment arranged itself around that angle. I packed the top layer of my drawers into a bag and left the rest folded, in case we needed to pretend nothing had shifted. I slept softer in other rooms. I kept a spare toothbrush in my pocket like a ticket I might or might not use. Messages from her came in waves, cheerful, practical, unword. Don't wait up. Hope you ate. Big day tomorrow. She added a smile at the end even when the sentences didn't need one. I sent a thumbs up and put my phone face down too. The city was big enough to let us miss each other without trying. Shifting loyalties don't announce themselves. They turn by degrees. A new we enters a story you're told at arm's length. A laugh arrives that doesn't belong to the room you're in. She'd say, "We went late," and I wouldn't ask who we meant. The space between the word and the answer did the work for me. The scarf kept its post on the door. I brushed it each time I left, the way you touch a railing out of habit, not devotion. It held the shape of her better than she let me. I waited for it to vanish on its own. It didn't. I matched the distance like a mirror. Fewer questions. Fewer corrections. More air. When she texted, "Home soon," I took the long way and arrived after. It wasn't a punishment. It was logistics for a house that had learned to breathe without cross-currents. By week's end the schedule had a rhythm, her nights longer, my mornings quiet, the scarf an unmoving witness. Nothing exploded. Nothing needed to. We were past fireworks. I kept my steps measured and my volume low. She said she needed space. I honored the request and let the miles do their slow, reliable work. I came back earlier than the routine I'd been keeping. The hallway smelled like takeout from somewhere downstairs. Our door was cracked for air. I heard her voice before I saw her, low and even, the way people talk when they think the room is entirely theirs. "He reads into everything. It's a lot." The pause at the end was gentle, like she was giving the other person time to nod. Whoever it was made a sound I couldn't make out, softened by someone else's couch. She stood at the counter with her phone in one hand and the faded green scarf in the other, the fabric winding through her fingers the way you roll a thought while you're deciding where to put it. The scarf slipped once and caught on her wrist. She looped it back without looking down. I let my keys touch the bowl by the door a little louder than necessary. Not a performance, just a notice. The conversation tapered. "Yeah, I know. I'll call you later," she said, with that light ending people use when they want to be kind and done at the same time. We met eyes in the reflection of the microwave before we met them directly. She smiled in a way that asked me to accept this as normal. I didn't argue with it. I nodded and moved to the sink, turned on the water, rinsed 2 plates that had the ghost of dinner on them. She set her phone face down and folded the scarf once, twice, 3 times, then undid the stack and draped it over the chair back like a towel left to dry. "I warmed yours," she said, opening the oven. Steam drifted and disappeared into the hood. "Thanks," I said. We ate at the small table. Forks, the hum of the fridge, a car on the street working its way up through the gears. Her chair was clocked a few degrees toward the window, away from me, the adjustment so modest it wanted not to be noticed. I let it go unremarked. If you watch long enough, even small angles point somewhere. She picked at the corner of her napkin. "Long day?" she asked. "Quiet," I said. I didn't offer itinerary, and she didn't ask for one. The room held a simple truce, basic questions, basic answers, no curiosity with teeth. It suited the space she'd drawn. Between bites, her eyes glanced at the dark phone the way you watch a door you expect to open. Not urgently. Just ready. The scarf slipped again and slid to her lap. She didn't lift it back up. I could see the worn place near the edge where it had brushed against bag zippers and table corners for years. The color had faded from green to something that remembered green. "I might be out late tomorrow," she said like a memo in a meeting. "Work thing. Then a catch-up." "Okay," I said. The word didn't carry more than itself. We loaded the dishwasher like we always had, the old muscle memory still intact. She washed, I stacked. We had the spacing wrong a few times, cups bumping because we didn't choose the same rhythm anymore. She laughed once, short, at a plate that wouldn't fit where it used to. "We'll get it," she said, meaning the plate, maybe, maybe not. In the living room, she folded into the corner of the couch nearest the window. I took the chair by the bookcase. Between us, the scarf lay across the arm of the sofa, a small stripe of color bridging nothing. The TV stayed off. We listened to the building settle. Upstairs, someone walked from one end of their place to the other and back, deciding things I'd never know. When she finally reached for her phone, the screen lit up her face in a cool square. She didn't hide it. She didn't present it either. Just a simple movement, thumb unlocking what wasn't mine. I watched the reflection in the window, not the device itself. "I'm going to shower," she said, already halfway up. Water started, steady and anonymous behind the bathroom door. I picked up the scarf and set it on the chair where she first left it weeks ago, the backrest holding its shape as if it had shoulders. By the time she came out, hair wrapped, the scarf was in its old place again. Her eyes rested on it for a second, then moved on. She sat at the far end of the couch this time, legs tucked under, whole body angled toward the window. I didn't correct the angle, or the distance between furniture. We didn't talk about the call. We didn't talk about the sentence that had landed between us before I walked in. The apartment was very good at carrying on. I let the quiet do the explaining and left the rest where it belonged, in the direction she was already facing. Morning carried itself on soft hinges. The kettle clicked. She moved through the kitchen without scraping a chair, without the casual noises we used to trust. Her bag was set upright by the door like it had somewhere to be even if she didn't. I asked if she needed the car. She shook her head once, eyes on the zipper. That counted as a conversation. By noon Maya texted, "Coffee near the park, 15 minutes if I could." She picked a table that kept our backs to the room. It gave us both an easy exit, which I didn't mind. She spoke the way a good friend does when she's been handed a fragile thing. "You look worn," she said, quiet enough that it didn't carry. "She says you worry yourself tired. Maybe let her breathe longer." I watched the steam slide off my cup and nod. No defense, no inventory. Maya waited for the rest, the pushback, the list, a hint that this story had another side. I let the pause settle. It told her I was listening, not negotiating. "She cares about you," Maya added. Then, because she's honest in small ways, she also seems lighter when she's not explaining. "You know what I mean?" "I do," I said. It was true either way. We sat with that. A child at the counter knocked a spoon to the floor and was surprised by the sound it made. The barista laughed. A bell somewhere at the door pretended it was still December. Ordinary noises, none of them ours. Maya reached for her glass. "I'm not picking sides." "You don't have to," I said. The room already did. It came out more neutral than it reads. Maya's mouth tugged, an admission without words. She touched my arm and let her hand fall back. That was the whole hug. On the way home, the train scraped through tunnels that knew my name. I took the long walk from the station, stopped by the river started in part 1, watched a gull hold its place over the current by doing almost nothing. Sometimes stillness looks like effort from the outside. The apartment met me exactly as I'd left it, except for one subtraction. The green scarf was gone from the chair. The doorknob was bare too. No note. No ceremony. I opened the hall closet and closed it again. If she tucked it into her bag, it made sense. It tightened the frame. It kept stray threads off the stage. I didn't text to ask. I didn't send a photo with a question mark. I folded 2 shirts into a bag for my brother's couch and set the bag by the door, not as a threat, just a practical decision. Space wasn't a theory anymore. It was an address change in small increments. That night she messaged a late, "Hope your day was okay." The tone was bright, like a checkmark in someone's app. I sent back, "Busy. Rest up." She waited for more. I didn't hand her the details she could pass along. The calls I didn't take found other ears. Little summaries started moving on their own, stripped of the parts one would have corrected. A mutual liked a photo of mine and sent, "Hang in there." I hadn't posted anything worth the encouragement. It told me what had been said, not by whom. I adjusted the rest around the absence. A towel left to dry instead of shared, a different coffee shop in the morning where they don't know our order. I slept at my brother's 2 nights without checking in. When I was home, I kept to the side of the bed I'd already claimed. She angled toward the window like before. I didn't redirect any furniture. What began in her mouth had moved into safer rooms. In those rooms, I was a man who reads meaning into the wrong pauses. Maybe I did. Maybe I'd earned that line. Either way, there was nothing to fix in a story that didn't ask me to speak. I gave her more air and took mine elsewhere. The distance wasn't a punishment. It was a boundary I could keep without announcing it. A week later I cut down the block by habit, and saw her through the cafe window before I saw myself in the glass. She wasn't scanning for me. She was checking the door between sips, waiting for a laugh I knew by the shape of her mouth when it arrived. He came in with that remembered ease, one of those names that once floated through our kitchen as nothing to note. She'd called him harmless. I didn't argue then. I don't argue now. They greeted with bodies that already knew the distance to keep. It wasn't much. Chairs angled toward each other, not quite touching knees, a shared pocket of air. Her phone lay face down near the sugar packets, the way she put it when she wanted to be seen not checking it. The faded green scarf, back from her bag, was draped over the spare chair like a coat waiting for someone who wasn't late, just invisible. It marked the table as taken. It marked the absence as intentional. I stayed on the sidewalk. The glass turned me into a shadow layered over their table, then into a stranger when a bus rolled past and rearranged the reflections. Inside, she tucked hair behind her ear and he leaned in to end his story with a light tap to her wrist, a small punctuation. She didn't shift away. She didn't laugh too loud, either. It was that quiet, rested kind of smiling she used to save for after we'd left her room and could finally say what we thought. She was giving that to him in public. It fit the new math. People moved around me with paper cups and errands. A cyclist clipped his bell. The barista glanced toward their table with the kind of recognition that grows after a few afternoons, then glanced toward the door like he expected the next person to belong there too. Loyalty has a way of recalculating without a scene. It just shows itself in who gets the easy refills and who gets only the nod. I could have gone in. The handle was warm from the last hand. I didn't. There was nothing to correct. I watched long enough to understand the choreography. The shared calendar open in their posture, the background of their commonplaces, the way her shoulders settled when he said something that pinned the moment in place. The scarf kept its shape on the empty chair. If she felt the draft from the door each time it opened, it didn't reach her face. She caught a flicker of movement in the window and looked out past it, scanning the street like she was searching for a taxi number or timing the light. Her eyes slid over where I stood and then kept going. I let the moment pass without catching it. The city gave us cover. No one turned it into more than it was. The miles I'd handed her had found a use. They organized into someone else's afternoon, into a table that looked practiced, into a story she could tell without me in it. I didn't fault the physics. Distance wants edges. It had mine. I stepped away when the light changed. The crosswalk counted down. Behind me, the cafe door opened and shut twice, a soft hinge doing its job. I didn't look back to make sure the scarf was still claiming that seat. I had enough proof. I kept my pace and let the street absorb the rest. By noon, a mutual sent a careful line. "You good? She says you're on edge." The phrase read like a diagnosis passed hand to hand. I let it sit. Responded with a neutral yes and a thumbs up I didn't mean. The typing dots came and went, then a sticker, then nothing. That was the exchange. Light, polished, oddly official. In the afternoon, another ping. Group thread. A joke at my expense slid through with a wink. Something about me keeping charts on moods. Laughter reacted the way laughter does in rooms I wasn't in. I muted the sound and watched the river for a while. Water didn't bother to defend itself. It just kept moving. She sent a sunny check-in that didn't ask anything. "Hope you're taking care, smiley face." The smile was an air freshener spritzed at the end of a hallway. I gave her a brief answer that could close the loop. She didn't press. The tone said we were tending to an image now, not a life. The scarf found its way back without ceremony. I came home late and there it was on my chair, neatly folded with a precision she reserved for company. It made the room look orderly. A small, well-placed courtesy. I didn't pick it up. I left it there like a card on a table after the guests have gone. Shifts announced themselves quietly. Invitations arrived phrased as disclaimers. "Just chill, no heavy stuff." People tipped their heads when they saw me, like approaching a skittish animal they'd been warned about. The story had been field-tested and adopted. I could hear it in their varnished caution. I wasn't keeping score. I was keeping still. In a bar I walked into by accident, I caught the tail of my name and the words, "Reads into everything," said not unkindly, just with that practice relief of finding language that travels well. They didn't see me. I paid for a soda, stood at the end of the counter, and watched a game until the commercial break. Leaving required less energy than explaining. At home, the living room had the bland cleanliness of a staging photo. Her mug with the chipped rim was gone. The books she always meant to reshelve were actually reshelved. The green scarf sat in its appointed square, green gone soft from years of washing. It felt less like a belonging and more like a prop there to say, continuity, even if the scene has changed. Later, another mutual checked in with the patience of someone fulfilling a promise. She worries about you. You know how you can be. I know how I can be. I also know how I've been. I'm fine, I wrote. It was the kind of word that satisfies records. The version of me in circulation became weather. Variable. Hard to pack for. Easy to plan around. If there was comfort in that, for them, for her, I wasn't going to take it away. I adjusted my routes. I kept to the longer paths by the water, where nobody needed me to translate my face into something reassuring. The scarf stayed on the chair like a polite placeholder. I let it. The room held its breath without strain. Messages pulsed, softened, faded. I didn't argue with their forecast. I watched the sky and kept my coat by the door. I answered by stepping out of the script. No scene. No audit. I unlocked the door at a quiet hour and let the hinge do the talking. The place didn't flinch. The lamps waited. The chair waited. I kept it simple. A box for clothes. A box for books I actually reopened. A small bag for the things that never migrate well. Watch, charger. A photo I didn't have to explain to anyone. I left the mugs we reached for without thinking and the pan with the stubborn handle. There's a difference between leaving and clearing a stage. I wasn't erasing us. I was taking my weight out of the room. The scarf sat on the chair like it always had when she forgot it, a faded green loop pretending it wasn't summer. I lifted it once, felt the thread give a little at the seam, and set it back so the ends hung even. Back of the chair. Same place as the first time. It made the room look arranged again. I put my key on the table, not tossed. A flat sound, then quiet again. The entry tray looked reasonable with one less piece of metal in it. I wiped a circle where a glass had been and didn't chase the ring. The bin got the obvious things, receipts with months on them, a grocery list in her handwriting that didn't require keeping. I didn't wonder where she was. I didn't check the map dots that make people pretend they know each other's days. Phone to do not disturb, not dramatic, just practical. Threads were muted in a row. The little icons grayed out like windows with the lights off. In the hallway I carried the boxes without scraping the walls. The elevator gave me the same clipped mirror I'd use for tie knots and weather checks. I nodded to myself out of habit. Ground floor, one more shift of air. The mailbox held nothing with my name in the window. Good. The landlord was in the office, or maybe just his chair. It doesn't matter who you end a lease with until you actually end it. I slid the spare key, the one he'd pushed on us before a holiday, across the counter and said it was time. He said, "All right." The way people do when they don't need the story. I was grateful for that. We didn't shake hands. Paper would come later. For now, the metal was his again. Outside, the day had the kind of light that turns brick into cardboard. I walked. The city let out in slow increments. Fewer stroller wheels, more delivery trucks, then long blocks where the echo traveled ahead of me. I took the river path and didn't count the runners. A train clattered on the far side and announced a place I wasn't going. I kept to the shoulder when cyclists called, "On your left," and resisted the urge to say, "Take it." The phone pressed a buzz against my leg I could have ignored forever. I didn't. I glanced on the lock screen out of courtesy to reality. "Can we talk?" No punctuation beyond the question mark. The kind of message that wants to set a table without saying what's for dinner. I let the screen go dark. Not a statement. Not a tactic. Just a choice about my afternoon. A bench offered a slat with a view of steady water. I sat long enough to know I wasn't sitting there to be seen. A dog tugged a woman into my periphery and out again. When the second buzz came, nothing new, the same line refreshed. I slid the phone deeper into my pocket and watched a leaf latch onto the surface and get carried until it didn't care to hold on. By the time I looped back to streets with storefronts, the sky had traded color for the practical gray of evening. I passed our corner and didn't look up. The window would show the chair and the scarf if I hunted for the angle. That wasn't necessary. I already knew what waited and what didn't. I didn't leave a note. Notes keep talking after you've gone. The lock had my answer. The boxes had my answer. The absence of my key had my answer. She would read the room without me. The city didn't notice me crossing the last intersection. That was fine. I wasn't crossing anything for them. I kept walking until the blocks breathed wider and the air felt uncommitted. The question on my screen stayed where I left it, and I stayed where I was going. Silence changed the lighting. Rooms I no longer stood in felt brighter in memory, as if the bulb had always been that soft, and I'd just been in the way. The last message from her stayed unread at the top of my screen until it sank behind new ones. I didn't turn on notifications. I let days stack without an answer, like plates you plan to wash when the water feels right. People have a way of testing their stories in groups. Without me to correct or nod, the edges showed. A mutual sent a careful line about running into her, then rewrote it a moment later with less enthusiasm. I didn't reply to either. I kept my walks and my quiet room and the small routines that don't ask for performances. Maya's note came early, 6 words that didn't try to fix anything. I see it now. I'm sorry. I watched the dots blink like she wanted to soften it further, then disappear. I wrote back, "It's okay. Nothing extra." She waited for a reaction I didn't offer, then left it there. That felt right. The old connection slipped out of her photos as quickly as he'd stepped in. Posts that used to carry long captions trimmed themselves down to weather and coffee. Comments thinned underneath. The laugh track went missing. It wasn't a victory. It was air recalibrating when a door closes. When the landlord asked about the lease, I didn't stretch it. A couple of emails did the work. I went back once, in the middle of the afternoon when the building was quiet. The apartment held our outline but none of our breath. The fridge hummed the same note it always had. Dust sketched the ledge where we'd kept keys. Her faded green scarf was still on the chair, exactly where I'd left it when I walked out. Sun reached it from the window, made the frayed threads show a little more. I picked it up, then set it back the same way. It belonged to a version of the room that was already gone. She hadn't come for it. Maybe forgetting is simpler than crossing back over your own words. I took the last box and checked the corners. No note, no final scene. The door clicked softly behind me. On the street, traffic knitted its own conversation. I didn't need to join it. Later, messages trickled through from people who used to ask for weekend plans. They were shorter now, or didn't require answers. I let most of them slide past. The story had stopped needing my voice. Echoes were doing their job. On the day the lease ended, the super texted a photo of the empty room for proof. The chair was gone. The scarf still hung over it in the frame like a caption for absence. He asked if I wanted him to keep it. I told him no. He could donate it or throw it away. Either outcome would be honest. That was the last piece tied to our address. There wasn't anything left to return or request. Space had started as a message at 2:13 a.m. and worked its way into a final cleared room. She learned what distance looks like when it doesn't argue with you. I didn't chase confirmation. I locked what I could control and left the rest to settle where it would.